Hi, welcome everyone. Thank you all for being here. Yay, yeah, give yourselves a round of applause. Let's go. Yay, welcome to October History Cafe on Bodily Autonomy and Reproductive Justice. It's going to be a great talk tonight, so thanks everybody for being here, including folks who are tuned into the live stream. We love you, YouTube subscribers. Yay, I'm Sora. I use they, them pronouns, and I work in public programs here at MOHAI. And for our low or no vision audience members, I am a white and East Asian person in a red vest, black shirt, and black skirt. A couple housekeeping notes before we begin. If you need to use the restroom, you know where it is. It's through the cafe and to the left, past the deli case. And we're really excited to present History Cafe in partnership with HistoryLink every month on the third Wednesday, so mark your calendars. And so a brief little schedule of events. So we're going to start. We're going to have a pretty interactive discussion, say like an hour, and then we can do some Q&A more directly. But our amazing panelists here are super capable and ready to go wherever y'all want to go, it seems. So interactive is best. Yeah. And so as we think about, reproductive justice, bodily autonomy, grounding in history, it's really important to acknowledge the space we're in and the land that we're on. And here at MOHAI, we're on the historic and contemporary lands of the Suquamish, Duwamish, Muckleshoot, and all Coast Salish people. Historically, Native communities were forcibly removed from this place, with lasting impacts on reproductive justice and reproductive rights issues. And yet, these communities still persist with great resilience. And so we have deep gratitude and respect for their unbroken stewardship of this place. And so we encourage you to visit the websites of local tribes to learn more about the people whose land you're on. So without further ado, really excited to welcome tonight's panelists from Surge Reproductive Justice, an amazing grassroots organization that mobilizes for reproductive justice. Starting from, I guess, right to left, or I don't know how the camera works, but we'll start with Elle. Jennings is an active member of the Pacific Northwest BIPOC community and serves in several organizations, including Surge, the Lavender Rights Project, and is a member of the Royal House of Noir, one of Seattle's premier ballroom houses. With Randy Ford?
Yeah.
Yes! And Senait Brown is an anti-racist organizer, educator, and curator of Black Power and Pleasure Spaces, who is active in the movements for Black liberation. She has served as director and co-chair of multiple organizations / collectives, including Blackout Washington and the No New Youth Jail campaign. And yay!
I was like, ooh, that sounds good.
Yeah. And Andi Garcia Brown is a birth worker and organizer. She became a birth doula in 2018 and then a postpartum doula in 2019. She completed her master's degree in nonprofit leadership from Seattle U, where she focused on how to best support organizations that support doulas. So really excited. Give them all a great round of applause.
Okay, wonderful. Do you mind just giving the prompts so folks understand where these questions are coming from? I think that would help the flow.
So we're going to start with
Take your time.
general kind of themes and topics that we're discussing. The kind of how did you come into this work, and then what is reproductive justice, and then what does it look like to organize for reproductive justice, and then love to learn more about some major victories of Surge Reproductive Justice and y'all's work in the movement. So kind of the broad strokes, if that feels accurate.
Light work.
Yeah.
Light work.
Cool.
And I think I can go ahead and get us started off with kind of some more detailed intros, definitely more specific to my experience of how I got into the work. And beyond reproductive justice, to kind of see, at least in Seattle, the greater kind of nonprofit industrial complex. It is very rich, and it is actually specifically, if you go into other states as well, it's extremely liberal, which is phenomenal for people like me. And so I actually remember in 2019, I'm from Texas, and I had moved to Seattle in 2018. So I was like working in hotels, doing like just like run-of-the-mill things, and I got fired because I began my medical transition, and it wasn't like going so well with like the optics of it. Just it was difficult for folks, and that's okay because I was working in Bellevue. It was not okay, but it is what it was. And I just remember having like this like long depression, this stints. I had very much formulated my life as like this one iteration of myself, and not necessarily post transition, but after coming out and making it public to the world, I was like, how do I now navigate a workspace as this new identity? And it was like very jarring. I just remember Googling something as simple as like Seattle trans employment. And it like positioned me to a nonprofit, which did, it's called Ingersoll Gender Center. It's a long story, but it's no longer what it is right now. But at the time, it was like a fundamental and kind of like, if you heard Seattle and trans, a very congruent nonprofit organization that did like trans liberation work. And I was able to meet like phenomenal, and I mean phenomenal, other Black trans organizers who got me into like the fundamental like access points of Black feminism, what it is to like be community driven and also like community forward, because it is one thing to exist in a community, but it's another thing to be analytical of your community, and then also knowledgeable of how to bring your community along. Like that takes skills, and those skills need to be learned. Anybody can actually learn those skills. And that's also an important part of like our organizing strategy. And so just along that path, I went through a couple of organizations, and I wound up at Surge, actually through a kind of like a pipeline, like a little friend was like, oh, you'd be wonderful for this position. In a little more detail, my position, I am the Decriminalize Sex Work in Washington organizer. We abbreviate that to DCRIMWA, and fundamentally under the full umbrella of reproductive justice. And we'll definitely go more into depth with this, but we do see under the lens of bodily autonomy, that the right to govern your own body and do what you want with it, including sex work, is an integral part, again, of bodily autonomy. And so I lead a campaign as well as a cohort and coalition of sex workers and sex workers who also organize here in the Pacific Northwest. So other community partners are with that. I won't name drop. That's a little bit of my intro into this work, and I'll just pass it down the line.
Right on. Yes, I can snap it up for that. We need all the love and energy, and end of the day caffeine stuff is possible. So greetings, everyone. I'm Senait, and I'm an anti-racist organizer. I'm a mama to 3-year-old baby brother Malcolm, and I'm the policy director here at Surge Reproductive Justice. I was like laughing and thinking about the intro a little bit from the website and everything, because I've had so many chapters in my very short life, because I'm still cute and young. It's my birthday month. So, you know, in the span of things, I've done a lot. And I think about when I got here the first time to Seattle. If those of y'all know me, I just moved back in July. But when I got here the first time from Seattle, I came from Chicago. And I remember I was just so over all the things that were happening, and I was like, I want to go to some place that's very clear about like race and racism. I want to work for a woman of color or a Black woman. I want to like, you know, I need to elevate. And so I thought like I found the utopia of every place. So, like I started out working at Solid Ground, if y'all know that organization. Yeah, maybe not the utopia, closer to like the white-topia, but
we're on YouTube.
On YouTube, yeah, check it. It was different. You know, I will say this though, to credit like, you know, the work they were doing for 14 years. There's a Black woman there named Cheryl Cobbs Murphy, and for 14 years she worked to get Solid Ground, which was Fremont Public Association, right before very white dominant culture space, to embrace undoing racism as an initiative. She was there for 23 years. And she built up the space so that my first week when I got there, I got an Undoing Institutional Racism training from People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And if y'all hear at the end of the story, we are still very much working through that analysis that they provide and the principles around how to organize, even here at Surge. And so that was how I got that introduction. I also got a reality check that this is not utopia, that poverty, racism, sexism, homophobia, everything might look different here, but it's still all up in here. The great thing is we had a chance to like pull out how these things manifest, right? So I learned a lot from a lot of brilliant organizers who took me up under their wing when I was talking and sounding like a hot mess, because I did come in here very institutionally oriented. I was talking about, how people of color just need to get closer to resources. And I mean, I was that person you probably wouldn't have been friends with. But folks like Maya Dalila, Mary Flowers, Dr. Gary Kente Perry, yes, Dustin Washington, a lot of folks took me in I was doing work around policy at Solid Ground, but I didn't really understand my own position to like race and racism and how I could be co-opted in just my existence working in institutions. So I had a rough road. I had to learn the lessons the hard way, which means a lot of fails forward, but it did bring me into an accountable relationship with Black, Indigenous, people of color communities and doing anti-racism work. I was able to join a network called Youth Undoing Institutional Racism. I was able to do work with them and accountability with other folks, a multiracial campaign called Ending the Prison Industrial Complex, and that's where No New Jail comes from. I was able to work with the Black Prisoners Caucus and actually take the skills, the analysis that I learned at Solid Ground around passing laws and policy and apply it in a community-based way, working with the Black Prisoners Caucus and all across the state, which are another group of people who organize the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. And so I got this like very real experience, but if you hear my whole story ever, there's lots of chapters and everyone runs into a growing edge, and I learned something and hopefully try to be better. Where I left off with after the No New Youth Jail campaign, it was profound to see how, in that case, 25 young people changed the landscape of juvenile detention, justice, whatever you want to call it. 25 young people did that, and I'm actually joining a panel in, Westchester County, this weekend, where they're talking about how to bring what happened in Seattle to New York and how zero use of detention, a resolution that was written by those 25 young people, actually translated to what they're going to be trying to do in New York. And we just had a call today, and we're even talking about the history and how the strategy, the process for how we got the policy passed was more important than just the policy. Because you can pass policy in really violent ways. Ouch. Like, really, from how, lots of violent ways. We'll talk about it. So this is like, I got my learning through this, and I hit a wall pretty hard, where I realized I was doing all this great anti-racist organizing, and, we're teasing about Googling my name. Don't do it. But, like, like all the things that show up under it, and it would look like, wow, you're just like the activist or organizer, or what do they call me? Whatever, of the year, and all this other stuff. And I was like dying, y'all. Like, I personally was exhausted, beat down, and being disillusioned, tired. I had all the language. I can get in there with the best of them. I could, battle it out of King County or down in Olympia, but personally was just melting down, right? And so I realized that there was something that I'm not achieving in this organizing process. I don't have a plan for myself. And it's actually just setting in on me right now. That's not just me as a person not having a plan for myself. It's the way that the organizing that I came into was set up. So the organizing I came into, Mama's Pan-Africanist, Daddy is Black nationalist. If you ask him, he's part of the Nation of Islam, the Masons, any group that's, independent and doing something, he was a part of it. I grew up with that, but I also grew up with a sense of what a woman's role in this work looks like, and that means decentering yourself. Does that sound familiar? I mean, that's a role that we can play in our families. That's a role we can play in our jobs. Also playing into a lot of archetypes, right? we talk about the mammy, right? The trope of the mammy. And I'm like, how many caretaking positions have I been in this movement where everybody's experience is center and mine is not? I mean, I know everything about officer friendly, everything about the prison industrial complex. I know everything about even what it does to Black men bodies, but do they know what my experience is moving through the world, how institutionalized racism has hit us? We might not be incarcerated, but we're dealing with the ramifications of that every day. And I was like, wow, I've been really taught to decenter myself in this work and my experience, and that's why I'm dying right now. And I'm not exaggerating. My A1C, diabetic, was way high, and just all kinds of health issues. So, you know, this shift to reproductive justice is not just like a shift in an issue, because it was never about an issue. It's about how, you know what I'm saying, these like systems and institutions have played with our bodies, how they've controlled what our possibilities are. It's about how, you know, as a consequence, right? And as a oppressed person, we've internalized so much trauma and ways of being. We can do organizing in ways that are not healthy. How we have left a lot of our community out, you know, even in just the anti-racism movement. Oops, saying that. And so something had to change, and I went home to get me some, you know, fun, to get healthy, you know, get me some dates. I just needed to get a little out of the box, and really successful. I got pregnant, got my baby coming on the way. Everything was looking real good. I was really excited. My focus and why I undo racism was about trying to find some joy, you know, and trying to center myself. So I thought, yeah, I did that, right? That's like, what's up? And as I share with some of y'all, Miss Stacy, that experience went a different way. And I ended up having a very traumatic, I don't want to say traumatic birth, because I feel like that codes what really happened. So let me just say what happened. I got misinformation when I went to Kaiser and got my genetic testing. They gave me a misinformation about the percent chance that my child could inherit the sickle cell trait or end up getting sickle cell disease, which he does have. I only had insurance that would afford 2 prenatals, two ultrasounds. And so people very clearly missed or did not speak up to the fact that my child was low birth weight. And I mean, his umbilical cord was thinner than my pinky, right? So all these things just compounded itself. I was going back and forth to Chicago, and I couldn't even get a hormone level test to see if I was pregnant and going to stay pregnant, because even after waiting on the wait list and going to the clinic and getting under the Medicaid pregnant people's program, they only gave me a stick to pee on. That was the extent of that prenatal care. All these things happened, rolling all the way up until me trying to get a midwife of color to take me into a birthing center. I was kicked out of the program by the second visit because they told me I was too high risk. And they wanted me to come to a night visit to a clinic that was 45 minutes away from my house by Uber. And thankfully, when I got the news was the time that Black midwife clocked and said that I needed to go get another ultrasound and possibly be admitted to the hospital. So she ended up saving my kid coming into the world. All these things happen, y'all, and it kind of wrecked me, because as we do all this work, I know y'all hope for like joy, right, and happiness and well-being for your families and like having the best quality of life. Like, I know that's a big thing for us, especially here. That's supposed to be a sacred experience, a place where you could be vulnerable. And I ended up almost dying because a doctor did not listen to me trying to tell them about my history with surgeries where scar tissue might be at. They cut me in a way so I can never have a vaginal birth. I'll never have that experience. They cut me in a way that cut my bowel open and spilled like life-threatening bacteria into my body. You know, it's the worst if you ever get that in your body. I was on heavy antibiotics for 6 months and had drains and things put in. I missed breastfeeding my child. I missed being with them in the NICU. I missed the first 6 weeks of their life. You know, so it's not at all just to be like a sad story, but just to understand, I had all the analysis and I had all the organizers, judge, and I was Seattle's most influential person of some year and all that, and that did not save me from it, because as an individual, that's not what this is about. It's about, damn, did we do this work if we're challenging the system around our bodies, around gender affirming care, health and reproductive health. While we're doing that, are we doing it as a collective so someone like me can have the sacred experience and be okay and be able to sit back and know I'm not going to die just because I want to have a child and experience some joy? Not just about me, it's about how we're building this. And that's why I came back. I'm like, damn, I'm in Chicago, missing my whole network. I mean, they wouldn't stand for that, right? Like, I mean, missing all this stuff, missing the opportunity to even try to push back on this thing. And so that's how I ended up, coming back to Seattle and deciding that I have to do work that centers my baby, me, that includes us. And centers definitely, but damn, includes us, We got a whole Black Lives Matters movement that happened, founded by 3 queer Black women and femmes, and it's centered on Black men and their experience. I mean, if that don't tell you something needs to change and we're missing something. So I'm here for all those reasons. I know I did a really long introduction, but I just be going off of what I feel in the room. And it's just real to me. It's not an academic exercise. It's not a toolkit. It's not a checkbox. To say that we're dealing with all these things. It's a holistic, way of moving and being where the process hopefully makes us all better. So I'm excited that y'all are excited about being a part of that. And one way you can do that is to donate. Just saying. I know we're talking about it, but no, I will bring that up all the time because, what it takes to do this, and I've seen amazing work at Surge happen. I had no idea the resources it really takes, how you have to shift those resources and plant them in places where they can be most effective. So real talk, right now we're talking about cutting stipends for people that can participate, lowering the amount because of these funds. And so donate for real, if you are feeling this and want to be a part of it and have the ability. It matters. It makes it so another person can come here. So I pass it on to Andi, who I love, who is a doula, and I love all doulas because they save my life.
So my name's Andi, she, her pronouns. Also another Brown as well, so Garcia Brown. One of the things I want to just highlight from Senait's story, I got my start in doula work in Chicago, and that experience is more frequent. I've never cried as hard as I've cried for other families as I'm working through hospital systems and how Black women and immigrant women are treated, and any birthing person of color is being treated, and not to throw any shade in Chicago, but it's the hospital systems. But I also got my start and moved here 2 years ago from Chicago, but I am a child of the border. I grew up on the Arizona, Mexico, California border in a very small town called Somerton, Arizona. I didn't really see myself as an organizer until I got this job, to be honest. I'm brand new to the team. I just started in August, so I definitely grew up in that area of just being a very rural town. Anything near us, about 20 miles. I biked a lot, so I had to go to school. If I missed the bus at 6 a.m., I had to bike to school that 20 miles. So it's definitely an interesting thing of growing up of a daughter of an immigrant how I kind of got into, I always thought I was going to be a midwife or an OB. I wanted to support birthing folks because my mom, I had 2 older sisters who died due to domestic violence situation-esque thing. So my mom lost her 2 eldest daughters before the age of 21. And how she described her birthing experience in Texas and on the border down there was that it was a punishment. She wasn't offered anything. She gave birth in a hospital, nun-ran hospital, and birth was a punishment, and she was supposed to sit in that pain and stew in that. So she had a very negative experience in her birth, her first 2 births, and then I was with her at my 3 siblings' births as well. So I got to see birth from a young age, and I was like, I want to make sure people feel awesome and are having a great time at their births because no one should be scared. No one should feel like they don't have a choice. But in Chicago, I kept seeing all this harm, and I also saw Seattle as this utopia, the birthplace of birth work. And I came out here to work with a midwifery clinic and like do program support on the nonprofit side of things. And like, jolly, I was wrong about it being a utopia, because we fall into these systems as well, and just reproductive justice. So when I see myself as like an organizer, I see myself as someone who is supporting, like organizing at births and supporting birthing folks going through that experience, and like really centering them, advocating for themselves, and like working on themselves so they can like feel prepared. And then I also see that on like us as doulas on the side as well, of like supporting us, because we're care workers. I'm a care worker, been a care worker most of my life. So it's just like, we definitely decenter ourselves. We put our lives on the lines for the people that we support, and we never have that autonomy per se of just like, we are care workers, we're gonna care for everyone around us, but we never care for ourselves. So that's one way that I kind of fell into Surge's lap, because I joined the Doula for All coalition that was facilitated by Senait when I was learning about, and we'll talk about that later, so doula Medicaid reimbursement here. And then also while I was doing my master's thesis, I was trying to figure out how do we support doulas working through the nonprofit space, because we are getting taken advantage of in some places. There's not support. We're providing, as care workers, we're not seen as individuals, because we're the people that we're taking care of are the priority as well, but so are birth workers and doulas. But yeah, I'll leave that, pass it back, or another question.
Awesome. No.
Yeah,
We can just go hop back into the material. And I kind of want to lead it off with like a little story, because when we are in spaces, when we like inhabit spaces or table or go elsewhere and put up our little banner that says Surge Reproductive Justice, a funny pattern that we recognize is, like some person walking by and they're like, the first thing they say is like, "Oh my gosh, y'all are awesome. Thank you for the work you do." And we're like, what do we do? Like, can you tell us what we do? Because why are you thanking us? And it's not a bad thing to thank us, but oftentimes what we see is a conflation between reproductive justice, a term that we can notify as reproductive health, and then kind of the big ticket one, which is in the line items of news and like people's, discourse, is reproductive rights. Those are like the hot button things. And so I would like to kind of go off and give the definitions that we go by for each, so we can kind of like highlight the key differences, and then of course uplift why reproductive justice should have its own lane and why it's important as kind of like a touch-all issue. Touch-all. Yeah, was that done right?
touch it all.
Yeah, touch all. So for the definition for reproductive health is it's a state of complete physical, mental, and social well-being, sorry y'all, in all matters relating to the reproductive system. So this includes your access to like safe abortions, contraception, I guess like state like healthcare, and a myriad of the other things that are already in existence. And then moving on over to reproductive rights. And reproductive rights are essential for women and birthing bodies to enjoy their human rights. These rights are centered on women's ability to make the best choices for their lives, including around the number of children they have, if any, and the spacing between their children's births. This includes prenatal services, safe childbirth, and access to contraception, and they also include access to the legal and safe abortion. And so while this may kind of conflate with our reproductive health, reproductive rights oftentimes is, and dare to say, and please correct me, sometimes it's the fight. It's like the debate, the things that can go back and forth, the things that may be more on the fence of like what's socially right. And then when we move over to reproductive justice, where we have like full fundamental understandings of bodily autonomy and choice, that's where you see like a huge difference between those other two definitions. And so I'll read it off. Reproductive justice is the human right to maintain personal bodily autonomy, have children, not have children, and parent the children we have in safe and sustainable communities. And so for us, reproductive justice, at least at Surge, it very much starts with analyzing power and being able to address that if it's a human right and not everybody is experiencing that human right, where are those inadequacies? Where are those inequities? We have to be able to analyze our pattern, analyze where the power is, analyze the issues within our communities, and then also empower our communities to see those issues as well. And as linear as that may sound, it's a lot harder, and it's a lot more work and capacity to change a narrative that often, like I grew up under a narrative of racism, of sexism, as many other people in this world, in this Western world, globally, have, right? If anybody's heard the term patriarchy, that's inequity of some sort. If people have heard white supremacy, these are those heavy key topics, but they have those real world issues that apply to how we address the inequities within reproductive justice.
Right on. I'm just gonna be honest, right? I had a hard time, with the terms at first, when I first came into this, and I told y'all my background. So I came in very clear about race and class. I did not come in very clear about gender, sexuality, sexism, gender roles, or anything around that. And I was well into my organizing, anti-racist organizing, before I was kind of presented with these concepts. And so my socialization was reproductive rights is some pussy hat wearing people that's marching on Washington. It's some white feminism. Y'all only care about the bill, Roe v. Wade only. And I was that's not me, right? And I will say reproductive justice, I was also I don't know who y'all are. Is this black? I don't know. You know what I mean? It sounds like almost the same kind of issues. So what are we doing? And I've been very thankful that I have people that are patient with me and will struggle with me and help me understand, because my read's not wrong, right? Reproductive rights is about legal access, and we need legal access. But a lot of times it stops at legal access because the folks that are behind a lot of the pushes around reproductive rights only need legal access to get on par with white men. And those are usually white women. So after it's done, they're like, good, I'm good, we good. And I'm like, nah, it ain't good. It's not good, not good at all. Because it was never just about one issue. It was about looking at the holistic picture of all the systems and institutions that impact us. And we ain't good on them fights. So when you're sterilizing, women of color, when you're shackling them while they're pregnant, when you are, doing your anti-trans bathroom laws, when you are, literally criminalizing us for living in all other spaces, Roe v. Wade becomes one of many things. And if you talk to folks who have been in it way longer than they say we never had Roe v. Wade. So it going away because folks were able to poke holes in the fact that there was never full solidarity and never full addressing of all of our issues, and that they're having an epiphany, we're not. And so I was like, okay. So, it's not to be ooh, them and us. I'm it's about getting on board with, we done tried something. That process did not work for everyone, right? The outcome clearly did not work for everyone, but if the process had worked for everyone, we would have been able to sustain that outcome, but we weren't. So why go back and try to do the same thing? It's like trying to run Hillary again. I'm sorry. Mm-hmm. It ain't work for a reason, and we're not doing no lessons learned. So reproductive justice to me is that holistic picture. I'm gonna need y'all to address all the things and how we are connected and tied together, and not, just address what's gonna deal with one particular group's identity and make them on par with a white supremacist capitalist system. All that to say, what does that mean then holistically? I gotta have a beyond. I come from People's Institute for Survival and Beyond. So that part's the survival part. Yeah, we gotta do that. But then what's the beyond? And I just gotta quote my personal organizer crush, Beulah. I'll tell that story later. But she has said in a training called Reproductive Justice is Inherently Queer. It is that for have reproductive justice or even like be in queer politic means it's possible to exist beyond limitations. We get an opportunity to practice what our world can be, to unlearn, to reimagine, and to work in ways that all societal aspects that impact our reproductive health and autonomy are addressed. And I was like, yeah, I like that. That's the world I want to live in, where all the possibilities are on the table for everyone, not just one group, and that includes not just one group of color either. So yeah, that's what I got out of it, and I definitely mess with reproductive justice, y'all.
And I was going to toss it to you all. Like, can you raise your hand, and if you had seen this definition before, or you knew that reproductive justice definition? Yeah. Okay.
I'll be researching.
Can anybody be honest to like, maybe before this or like in some previous time, y'all had some conflation between these definitions? Because I certainly did. When I heard reproductive justice, I was like, oh, okay, women's rights. Yeah. So yeah.
100%. Same.
No, seriously. And it's like kind of like when we're talking about even the preliminary things or something, I don't want to like make it seem like as, oh, you don't know this. But as fundamental as definitions of like how we're moving through movement work with like kind of not necessarily doing the same things, but having the same trajectories. Sometimes, oftentimes, shared language is a tool and a device for like better movement work. And that's just a reality. And so we oftentimes want to get like just people, again, congruent on the definitions before we get more into kind of the history of it. And then I think also speaking, I lost it. Never mind. We're going to move on. It was
Well, I want
like
to emphasize that everyone was also saying the intersectionality piece of reproductive justice. So reproductive justice was barely founded in 1994 by, I think, 14 Black femmes. 16?
Yeah.
16.
Sister song.
Yeah, Sister Song down in Atlanta, Georgia. So if you ever look up their website, fantastic. But it was just that, like, reproductive justice for me means that it's highlighting the lack in the space. So it's definitely also a place, because I'm also really brand new to reproductive justice. As someone who's going like the whole medical route, was going to go to med school, all this fun stuff, I knew nothing about that. And that's one of the things that kind of switched me on my course of like being a medical provider, is just because like I feel like I need to learn more about everything and what's happening if I wanted to serve clients or people in my community. But yeah, I lost the train of thought, but it was just one of the key things. It's just a little bit more provocative too, because it erases, it erases that shame, the guilt, the isolation that a lot of folks feel in community too, where it highlights those intersections of where we all are, but we're like, I know for me personally, there was a lot of like shame growing up in the Mexican border as a mixed Black and Mexican, like mixed race individual, the shame within the Catholic Church of just like being in my own body was terrible. So it's like, it's definitely coming into reproductive justice. It's literally the last year and a half of my life. And I'm like, wow, it opened up so many different doors and like theories and people and community that I just never thought I would be able to like experience. And that's one of the key things too for reproductive justice.
Absolutely. We often use a what we call a Black feminist lens, a queer Black feminist lens, which is like devoutly different, of course, from traditional feminism, where very much like Senait, kind of when I would think of feminism, I would think of, that's not really for me. That's not really a thing that I see within myself from the kind of conceptualizations of it. Again, like tonight I mentioned like the pussy hats and like the who that was for and who that was targeting. Again, like I stood outside of it. And so without even knowing it, early me was like, okay, sorry, I didn't know this, I was thinking this, but the feeling I felt was like, this is very racialized, right? And then later I got the language for it. I was like, okay, it's the the Black piece that's missing. Actually, it's the POC color, like the people of color, like lens that's missing from like this, this idealism. Like you see it over and over again. But stepping into this space, let me think of this real quick. Got it. I oftentimes think, looking again at reproductive justice, in analyzing power, you have to then analyze oppressions. And like, that's not to like play like oppression Olympics or put people against each other, which white supremacy has a really good job of doing that, right? Patriarchy does a really good job of putting like, you know, marginalized identities against each other to help prop itself up. But when you're looking at those and addressing how those inequities are impacting us, like it's not just the healthcare system, it's like every system. And if you can address the pattern, then you can like point it out to people. If Senait had a traumatic birth, and then I can go to another person of color, just actually another birthing individual, and see if they had a traumatic experience. Most people in this room probably know a person who may have had a traumatic birth, right? But does media depict that as much? Like, media is kind of like this
It's
wholesome
so
experience.
happy-go-lucky.
Yeah. And even if it's hard,
Look who's talking.
even if it's hard during, it's magical after. And even those realities are not true. And so anything from the media depiction, what's that called? The like media depictions that we receive, like stories, sorry. Thank you. Yeah, all these archetype stories, the media that we're fed, it helps influence society. And so, you know, it's not the end all be all, but that's sometimes when people are like, oh, representation matters, blah, blah, this and that. Like being able to see yourself in something, get into a space where you are welcomed, which oftentimes takes a little bit of like you seeing yourself in that space, and then being able to again have access to, we just call it knowledge, but anything from talking about what these issues are, again learning the language as I had mentioned earlier, learning a racial analysis. Like I know we do tons and tons of like race-based analysis, like gender-based analysis, because even if one aspect doesn't affect you, and sometimes I don't know how many people have marginalized identities, but sometimes when you have multiple marginalized identities, something as we call intersectional oppressed identity, sorry, just intersectionality, like all those things working sometimes for you or against you altogether based off of where you fall on these identity hierarchies, being able to address those patterns, being able to see that within yourself and then within your greater communities, that's just like, it's amazing how much that's missing within our own communities. And so sometimes we call it waking people up. We're trying to say, oh, you're woke, but it is like waking people up and getting folks again empowered to that knowledge, which is a huge part of reproductive justice. And then you can, like, once people are woken up, you can like organize strategies, organize like how are we then getting it to the larger or the larger community, and it just grows kind of like in a circle effect.
What was the third question again?
Let's
So
get
you gotta read it one more time.
I think a win, and I think talking about doula for all, possibly.
Oh, okay, we down there?
I mean,
Let's look at the timelines. Do we?
Go for it.
Okay. We can.
Ooh, it's okay. I know my microphone is being dirty today. I'm so sorry. It's like doing us so wrong. Okay, you can still hear me though.
And while Soda is getting these timelines up, the first one, I'm making sure it's correct.
it's in presentation. That's okay.
Oh, I see. So, okay. You can just like circle through it. We're not going to be like going through it individually. But we did have a timeline. Feel free to look up on it. That we do for a presentation or a workshop of ours called Reproductive Justice 101. And this is actually kind of like a recently like sourced timeline. The first one being a timeline that is for essentially white feminism and reproductive rights that white women experienced here in America. And those are often kind of like the big wins. The ones that are mapped through like suffrage, and sorry, that sounds so disdainful. And we do have a second one, and I know it's a little hard to kind of map unless they're like stacked. But if you were to see the timelines of this first timeline and then the second one, which is kind of more a time that follows the rights that were gained by Black women, there is a kind of a very unhealthy relationship between the two. Oftentimes with white women's rights responding and or infracting on just Black rights in general. And at the time, sometimes like Black men's rights because men had the rights. I'm sorry. Men had, like, technically, Black men had the legal right to vote prior to white women. There's a point in the timeline, and I remember doing the training a while ago, and we had, like, a group of Black aunties, and they were like, wait, what? Black men had the right to vote before white women? And then they worked it out with themselves, and they're like, oh, wait, but, you know, due to, like, Jim Crow and all of these poll inadequacies and essentially voting, what do they call it? Voter.
Yeah,
Thank you. I'm not lost. It's like, what time? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. That the realities of like black men being able to vote, they weren't that true, even though like the legalities were there, which lent to Senait's very, very real realization that like policies are just policies. They can be passed, and until that actual like cultural work / cultural change is done. I oftentimes think of like again the campaign that I lead for decriminalizing sex work, like anywhere technically. We fundamentally know that if tomorrow we pass a law that's like sex work is decriminalized, like if you know you are doing sex work and you're soliciting, there's like no punishment due to it. That even if there's not state-based violence against the sex worker, that does not eliminate violence against sex workers. It doesn't eliminate the narrative of how people view sex workers in our society. And unfortunately, it's very low, right? There's pragmatism to that, and definitely different aspects of respectability within like what's ideal sex work and what's not, but fundamentally like there's stigma that's around it, and we know policy does not change culture. Reproductive justice takes that concept in, and while policy and moving policy is a tactic that we use in the greater scheme of things, how we're bringing our communities in, again, sharing, I'll not just say teach, but sharing that knowledge, sharing that education, sharing our experiences, you know, because like when I match my experiences, which oftentimes, I see this often, actually, side note, I see this often in Seattle amongst like Black queer people. Oftentimes we're transplants. We're like people who were not born here in Seattle. And so we're coming from all different pockets of the US with actually varying different experiences, but somehow we like work in our own patterns. And we're like, there's no way. Oh wait, there is a way, because underlying, we're probably all Black or people of color, we're queer. And just with those two intersectionalities come like a host of accompanying, I don't want to call them issues, but just like life experiences that you have to navigate being that far away from the American ideal. And that's just to be able to analyze it and say like, again, this is like systematic. Like I grew up thinking that like hearing the Black jokes, hearing the gay jokes, hearing the trans jokes, hearing the like being different or being, treated as different, well, that's a normal experience, right? That's what I grew up with. That's normal. Not necessarily. It doesn't have to be that way. And that's kind of where, in my eyes, reproductive justice is able to get in the door, teach, and also get people aware that, again, the issue isn't you as an individual. The issue is systemic. The issue is racial. The issue is like gender-based, and all these things are socially constructed. Meaning, if they're constructed, they can be deconstructed. Right? I don't know if it had that because I've been running. Pass it back.
I was just saying, I was like, yes, if they are constructed, they can be deconstructed. I love that. That needs to go on my t-shirt every day. Because seriously, I mean, thinking about policy, because we're shifting over, y'all, right? A policy, especially in changing laws and all that stuff, people get all intimidated. They start talking about, oh my God, the problems are so big, we can't do nothing around it, and all that. But I think that, just like I was saying, that thing is, if it was done, it can be undone, right? We have to understand why it's been done. And that's what organizing is. It's not just getting people on board because they're scared or about what's happening, or, oh my gosh, I'm going to do something out of fear. Fear don't last that long. You know what I mean? It does not sustain a movement. But if you can help people to understand, like, look at this problem, look at the patterns amongst us that we're all facing. Now let's analyze this and see where it's coming from. Who benefits? Who has the power? Who don't? Why did this happen? Like, when people really run down that history, it's not what you're gonna get in school. It's not what you're gonna get on the media. But when you really run down that history, you find out, damn, I'm getting played. Like, somebody's getting paid and somebody's getting played. Like, I think there's so many examples of that. I'm on my growing edge, right, too. So I'm always getting information, getting me to think quickly about the different things that are out there. And I remember Jackie, our illustrious, beautiful, and amazing and talented. Hey, Jackie. I'm sure you're all here peeking on us. We here. We was on time and everything. But our leader, Jackie Vaughn Strategies, told us one time, she was like, well, I was like, why is there so much focus on who gives birth, who's getting married? This is one of the times all the wedge issues came out. Who gives birth? Who gets married to whom? Why is there such an attack on that? I get it. It's a divisive thing. It's provocative. Maybe it's a distraction. That's kind of what I thought. And she was breaking it down to me. She's like, we already know the answer to this. If you look at how, a capitalist system, right, that then upholds white supremacy as well, is constructed, then you understand that there are people that need to be used certain ways to do that. So she actually reminded me of history that I told her at first about the 1950s. And I don't know if y'all ever have peeped this. It's in Race and the Power of Illusion. It's on PBS, but they do like this whole segment on what makes a good family, a good community, right? Can you imagine what they said? Like in the 50s, Stepford wife status. What would be a good community or a good family? Y'all know it.
Y'all better say it.
Say it.
What's up?
Ooh, nuclear family.
Just 2 kids, not 2.5?
It's 2.5, 2.5. 2.5 kids, what else? Women working in the home, father working outside the home. What else? You ever heard the White House, white picket fence, white dog, 2-car garage and everything? Like it was a whole thing. And if you really look at the history of that, it was a paid for kind of like almost propaganda that was like put out because it was about trying to get families and a good family into a configuration in which they could continue to use, bodies for labor and keep them indebted to keeping a capitalist system moving, which means that if you're always going for that 2-car garage, you got 2.5, meaning a baby on the way, kids, and you are, trying to get that big house in the suburbs, you're always going to be in the hamster wheel, right? Working towards those things. And so they put that together. It was also during the time they were consolidating whiteness, right? Everybody wasn't white at the same time. We know this. And so there were people that are consolidating that and inviting different new groups in to be white and taking all that wonderful GI Bill money and, money to get and start building that housing equity. So it was a consolidation of power, and it was trying to get people locked into that hamster wheel. Now, what happens when you defy that like beautiful little picturesque, idea of what it means to be a good family in a good neighborhood and a good car and a good house? It goes against right? That goes against what has been set up. So people are not mad because they really care what's going on between your legs or who you're having sex with or who you're marrying. They're mad because you don't fit into the mold of what they created to continue to, build that capitalist structure in this country. You're queer. You're like me. I'm building a tiny home community for my family. I'm living intergenerationally. You are, doing sex work, which is not something that they can go ahead and get their IRS taxes from and pull things out of that, right? Like your very identity when you're outside of those quote unquote norms is a front to that structure. And as we know, when you play with people's money, it gets real violent real quick, okay? And yes, is race all up in that? Absolutely. But historically, it's because when you pull race into it, it's a way to keep a certain system in place. It's a way to keep us in confusion and keep us playing that game. So did they utilize race? Absolutely. Did they utilize gender and gender roles and trying to make it like so rigid, right, that everyone has to fit into it? For sure. But our very existence of folks, and I love so much the work, I'll never say it to you, and I'm impressed with the work that Elle is doing because that whole group, right, that's organizing in Decrim is pushing back just in their existence. And so what, that does for us is it makes us have to look at other possibilities. It makes us have to look at a world that actually serves everyone. It makes us have to look at a world that serves everyone that is not white, cis, het, and all these other things. So that in itself is beautiful, and I think that is a part of the strategy, y'all. It's not just about coming up with a cool policy solution. It's about coming up with a process that we can be liberated in as we move the policy, because then that changes culture and it creates something that's sustainable. So our organizing strategy is that we never focus on just the policy, like you said. We focus on the process, right, and how we got there. And we do those through using principles. Now, this is gonna sound real, maybe rigid in its own stance, but I've never seen more effective principles than the ones that the People's Institute for Survival and Beyond uses. And they're just words, but it's the fact that there's a collective meaning around each one of the words that makes us know that we're undoing racism, sexism, classism, and gender-based violence, right? So we'll say, hey, yeah, we're gonna go pass a policy, duels for all, beautiful, amazing, queer, trans, independent, Black, Indigenous, doulas who got it together, y'all. That is the group of people I get to work with every day. And, we could just jump into just saying, oh, we're gonna do a policy, but we don't. We actually say, well, first of all, what is our measurements of success? What are they gonna be? If it's not a traditional white dominant culture measurements of success, how many policies, how many people came to the rally, how many folks came to your listening sessions? That's not our measurements of success, because that process and doing stuff like that almost dehumanizes us and it doesn't liberate us. So we're looking at, what are we gonna do and how are we gonna do this policy work in a way that you come out with your back straighter? That's the best way I can say it. Some people say, come out with a sense of your own power. I love that too, but I'm like, I wanna come out feeling like my back is straighter, right? Like meaning I can go into a hospital system and I kind of have a matrix read about what's going on, and they're not gonna confuse me, right, with all those different things. I can go over to my kids' preschool and know some stuff is gonna go down there, and I'm gonna navigate it different because my experience working with doulas for all, right? That's what I mean about getting a sense of your own power. We have principles around history, how we share culture to get our lifeblood back, right, to get in our humanity. We have, principles around gatekeeping and accountability. We are gatekeepers at Doulas for All. Yeah, we are the go-to people to look for when they're talking about birth doulas in the state. But we also know we're gatekeeping that information from all the other doulas, families of color, and other folks. So how do we do accountable and liberated gatekeeping? We do these principles because they're doing them in prisons, because they're doing them in other spaces. And we can all, whatever issue you're working on, the issue don't matter. The thing is, can my folks go over to where you working at? What's your name, bruh? Yeah. What's your name? Phelps? Okay, so if you organize in Phelps and you got some people with you, I can send my people over to where you're working at. Doesn't matter what issue you're working on. They're with you because they see you're manifesting these principles, right? That your process is gonna make better families and babies and different worldviews. That's why I'm in it. And so that's how we got this win. Now, it's nice to have a little icing on the cake and say, we passed our own bill, we lobbied our own bill, we got Medicaid reimbursement, we're going for the highest rate in the country, all that other stuff, yes. But that was because the process itself was about being liberatory. We didn't go for the crumbs. We talked about going for what we actually need, right? We didn't fall into some traps. We analyzed power and didn't fall into traps of having lobbyists speak for us and dehumanize us how they're trying to get their win for their policy. Therefore, they'll do things that can undercut you in your own existence. We said, nah, we're gonna lobby our own stuff. What happens when the white woman lobbyist, which this really did happen, came to our meeting and said, all that racial equity stuff is great, but are y'all really gonna pass the bill? I mean, you can't be serious. I'm paid to do this. I've been doing it for 25 years, and spazzed out because she wasn't being centered in the organizing work and tried to disorganize and disempower people in that space. And I would say, without telling the whole story, 2 years later, after we already passed it, I hope y'all not putting that picture up, okay. After we already passed the bill, she came back and she was like, I just can't, I never seen anything like it. When I came into this, I just never seen anyone do policy like this. I didn't think it was possible. And I was like, you were in your box, we got you. And, you also were being asked to be in an accountable and authentic relationship with cutie BIPOC folks, and we were doing it in a way where we weren't your advisory, but we were the ones leading the strategy, and you were struggling with your whole identity. I got you, but the fact that she now had that reflection, that itself, right, is a measurement of success. Now, it wasn't our total goal. She wasn't the center of everything, but I'm glad she picked it up. But this actually does result in the results. We already have it mandated to have Medicaid reimbursement, but we're creating a model for community-led policy that folks around the country are coming to. And not just the people who want to see it happen, the 14 states who already had it passed and have crashed and burned in different pitfalls, and have it not implemented, no one registering. All these things are coming to our meetings like, yo, how do we get on the same community-led strategy, right? How do we build a base that's strong enough to hold and sustain something? And so, it's beautiful, and we still on our edges. We still are trying to connect what is the difference between decriminalizing sex work, working with a birth doula, building, the things around storytelling that are come out with other issues. People can get so siloed, even us at Surge. But the bigger thing is how do people feel and see these issues connected? They're all a part of reproductive justice. They're all manifesting sexism, patriarchy, racism, and all the isms, right? And if we can see that connection, that's the way we can actually make movement. But it takes hella longer, and you have to move at the speed of community. A bill in traditional white culture, a bill policy that you pass usually starts in August, maybe. The people, organizations start in August, right? Get the bill going. Maybe get it filed early in December, run it through January, beat the hell out of each other until March, or depending on what year it is, and then they disappear for the summer. Everybody stops talking to each other, and people are beat up. When I say beat up, they stab each other in the back, put bags over each other's head, whatever, metaphorically, really, it's real ugly down there. It's everything you think politics is. It's a giant high school. It's like Degrassi, but in Olympia. And they do all that, and then they come back, ready for more the next August, nothing happened. Oh my God. That don't work for our community. That don't work. We got, I'm just talking, I'm generalizing like a mug. In the Black community, respect is a big thing. You crossed me on respect and we lost that relationship, we are done. We are done for this generation. We might be done for a couple of generations. Don't call me around election time. Don't talk to me about no policy. I don't care that I'm most impacted. I'm most impacted by every damn thing. The toilet seat most impacted me, okay? Everything is we're most impacted by. So keep telling us every policy is gonna be most impacting people of color, duh. We know that. But it's just, it really will make a rip. You're not getting nothing done, right? That's how it traditionally goes. For us, we've been working on doulas for all since straight, not stop, since 2020. 2020, we were making our decision about whether or not to run a bill. We prepared, we decided not that year to run a bill. We prepared that entire year, all the way through, vetting new people, training our folks up, making sure we had resources, make sure we're building beyond all them principles. We've been going since then. I have not had a break since 2020, not even a week. So when we say donate, this is what we're talking about, because that time, everybody was getting stipends for being there. Everyone had childcare for their kids when they came through. Everybody had gift cards and food to eat when they came to every event and meeting. You know, it was things like that that helped us to be able to go that hard, because I'm tired. But, you know, it was things that made that process humanistic for us. So those were the donations go to. It ain't going so I can get me a little pop in salary, because that ain't going to happen at no little nonprofit. But it does go to making sure folks can stay in it, you know, who want to, and that we're making it a place to go. I have a 3-year-old. I can't do this work without my baby being here. They know baby comes to the office. It's a collective. Baby comes to the conferences. Baby comes everywhere. I need a refrigerator for his medicine. I need someone to help me when he's screaming and crying and I'm trying to speak on the mic, or, you know, help to teach him something in the room. He's a part of this work. And I was thinking how lucky I am that that can happen, because it happened nowhere in my, you know, institutional jobs, and it definitely didn't even happen in the anti-racist movement that I was doing. I was kind of expected to, I don't know, be super mom and have the kid hidden away somewhere, and I don't know who was supposed to feed him or whatever, but it wasn't a part of that. This reproductive justice world does give that. I get that as an employee. Everybody who engages with us should get that. So even, you know, in a baseline, trying to give some resource, and resources aren't always money, all right? Money helps. Resources could be a connect. Maybe you know somebody with some money, but that's where it goes to. So I will say, shouting out to, you know, dropping them coins for the folks, because again, I'm feeling the little impact of having to go and tell people like, yo, yeah, that little stipend's about to go down, y'all. Like, you know what I mean? And some folks was counting on that to participate, but that's what's happening right now. So anything that you can share helps, and I'll pass it over to family Andi, who is up and coming and taking over Doulas for All. Oh, I'm getting a break soon.
Yeah.
I was like, I have no idea how happy, but yeah.
You can see how happy you are. It's okay. I'm excited to join. So I actually was a community member like through Surge-esque when it's House Bill 1881 was passing. I was actually on the midwifery side of things, so supporting the midwifery bill that was going on, doing a lot of advocacy stuff for the clinic I was working at and the midwives that I support. So it was really nice to be able to like pop into Doulas for All and just be taken care of, and like have that collective collaborative space of just like being able to share our ideas. And it was it was like polar opposite of, we came up with the ideas in like Doula for All. The meetings I did get to go to, we were like having those conversations, group agreements, things like that. Where working on the other side, on the midwifery bill, everything was pre-scripted for me, which was lovely in the sense of everything's written out. I just have to like sign off, approve, record a message, thumbs up, share it, tweet it, whatever. But it was like a completely, like I said, a 180 process, just because like I got to sit in community with people who look like me, who did the work, who've been in the same experiences and scenarios that I have been in, and like be able to like share our stories and like real life experience of just like, oh, well, we want this to happen. We want these to be the core competencies. I think like one of the key things that like made my voice feel heard was like, I don't remember what meeting tonight, but it was like we were talking about background checks, and I was just like, and that was like the most impactful one, because it's like, does the state make all of us go through background checks? Which back in Chicago, we had a prison doula program, which we were training incarcerated folks to become doulas to support each other while they labored in Cook County. And one of the key things that popped up, if like the state mandates background checks, this stops the opportunity for people who have been previously incarcerated to like do doula work. They could be the best doula in the world, but then because of this background check, they wouldn't be able to practice, or still be able to practice but not be able to enroll in this program and get additional funding and money through supporting their clients and community that are on Medicaid. So that was like the first time I had like brought something up, and I felt like brave to speak, and like we were like, yes, that's true. Individual clients can request background checks, and this is what we put into what our recommendations for as we're doing the rulemaking process right now. So it's such a cool experience in general, and why I think it's such a win too, because it was led by community. It was facilitated by Senait and a bunch of other amazing doulas and birth workers in community that are doing amazing things. But it was the first time I actually felt like my voice being heard as a doula as well, just because in like how I was trained as a doula too, it was like smile, be happy, be quiet, especially in Chicago with the program I was working with, because we couldn't ruin the partnerships we had with these hospitals, because if we ruin this partnership, our services wouldn't be able to be provided in community. So it's like we were told to stay in our lane, especially when it comes to advocating, and make sure just to be like the little birdie in our clients' ears, because if it comes from them, yay, but if it comes for us, that put us on the chopping block. So it was just that experience was like the most impactful, and that was before I was even hired on as a staff member. So it was just really cool. I think it's a big win, just because I get to work with amazing people who are doing amazing things in the community every day and supporting clients, and just, yeah. So also, I'm the birth justice organizer. I didn't say that. And I work on the Doula for All campaign and the Black Perinatal Health campaign as well. Not crisis. There is a crisis, but we have a Black Perinatal Health campaign at Surge as well.
Yeah, they get that. I love y'all.
I mean, yeah,
Is it
no,
question time for
I
the
think it might be
audience?
question time.
Yeah, so say all the things, y'all. Or like, you talk so fast. What the hell was that one? That's all good. All things are welcome.
All things are welcome.
I have a microphone, so if you could raise your hand, then the people on the live stream can hear you better if you have a question. I know it seems silly in a small room, but it's for those at home. Anybody have a question
Accessibility.
or a comment?
Oh,
A wondering?
That helps.
I was unfamiliar with the difference between reproductive justice and reproductive rights. I think that's I'm sort of still stewing in that. That's a really interesting distinction. And I'm curious, what policies or changes can be made to improve aspects of reproductive justice aside from birthing?
that's a good question. Do you want to take that one?
The summary of what I heard was like, outside of birth, what kind of policies are like current policies, or what's happening in
What can be done?
what can be done? Ooh, for me, I think of like going against the like the trans bathroom bills. That's one of the ways that is a policy that like speaking up against, because those are policies that are being passed in our southern part of this country. That's like one opposed.
Yeah. Another one, and it's not one we are currently working on, but we have been in rooms of discussion of. Has anybody heard of a term called guaranteed basic income? Awesome. Which is, not to make it a generalization, but in essence kind of like a leveler when we're talking about marginalized communities having access to like equitable ways of living. Who were we having a conversation with when they said, wait, race is a health?
Oh, race is a public health.
Oh yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, which is like so very true, but like that terminology and language was only agreed upon in what, 2020?
2020.
Coming off of BLM and George Floyd, where we all understand that systemically race and gender are like intersections and just like stand alone as well as identities that, the marginalized identities within those two like groups incur like massive amounts of violence, whether it's like physical violence or other forms of violence. And so like even being able to like have that language like stated like within King County, like within the city, is not necessarily like an important like change or anything of that nature, but it does show progress as to like people getting on board, and then people also understanding. Because I guarantee you, like our predecessors in organizing, or like not necessarily saying those same things, but they were saying the same thing. They're like, yo, this is like an issue. This is like an issue that we are all facing as people of color, or as, you know, marginalized gendered identities. So yeah, that's kind of what's going on. Of course, we're talking about, sorry, like again, it's kind of a very interesting aspect, because again, like even before we get into the policy work, very much like Senait was saying, with their Doula for All campaign, there was a year they're like, okay, the policy work and engaging with policymakers, that's not this year. We gotta still do the base building, figure out who we're engaging with. We definitely are still in that process with like our Decrimois campaign, where we're trying to source who we need to be in the room. Like there are plenty of identities of sex workers that we have not included yet, and that's all due to proximity. We need to be accountable to that, and so we aren't necessarily putting on hold, but we're like keeping that note and leaving the door open. And very, again, much like saying, because girl, you said the truth, that with even just for their win with Doulas for All, the bill for Doulas for All, receiving Medicaid reimbursement, sorry if I'm butchering that, that there are like plenty of other places around just the states that have been like, oh, we tried that and didn't work, so what did y'all do? Like models, or even being the first people to do that. I know when we think of like decrim models around the world, of like there are places that have legalized sex work. Like legalization and decriminalization are vastly different things. And even then people sometimes have those conflations. And so like, an aside to say that like the language of things is important and the knowledge of things is important. Some policy work, sorry, not to get off focus, but we understand that like when you are able to either be the model or improve on the model that may be working or existing, like that current thing, there are accountable ways to do it, and then there are also, again, ways to include the folks who have been doing the work and then building on that. I feel like that's a very integral part of reproductive justice. So you're not like overriding what people are doing. You're not trying to like create new things if they're already in existence. A part of reproductive justice and the accountability like measurements that we utilize is like also looking elsewhere where this work is already being done. You know, we can oftentimes, you know, we'll outreach the hand. They don't have to, you know, it's all about people's capacity. They don't necessarily have to be like, oh yeah, we want to be in this movement work with you. But an accountable thing is that we did the outreach. We said, hey, we noticed that you're doing this thing. We're inquiring. We're trying to figure out some things. And that just helps, in my eyes, keep like this process accountable to communities, as well as informative as possible.
You said that there were folks who were coming to you that had tried, 14 states had passed something similar, and it didn't catch.
Yes.
So what were the common things that prevented them to having success that you have?
That's a really good question. We were surprised when we seen them, first of all. Maybe not, shouldn't have been surprised. So what's happening is that the way that we started off with our bill is like we owned it from the beginning, right? And we built the strategy, the diagnosis of the problem, what we want the solution to be with community, and then we moved to policy. Other folks don't always have that same circumstance. There's people who are pulled into government tables to do pilots and then found themselves stuck there. People who have joined advisory councils and found themselves shut down. There's folks who passed the bill, but maybe they passed it in a way that was they were dealing with Medicaid, but they're also dealing with private insurance, and so their battle during with the legislators in their space beat the bill up to the point that it wasn't effective and people didn't want to enroll, right? And even with our process, my goodness, like it's so much. It's not just like, oh yeah, Medicaid reimbursement and you're good. We've had to get into the weeds with the Department of Health, the Healthcare Authority, and the managed care organizations to actually do a racial and gendered assessment of their policies, learn them and comment on them and push at the same time. So the implementation is where things, are struggling. And so those states that got things passed, it looks good on paper, like, yay, they're gonna have Medicaid reimbursement, but they might not ever make it to the place where they're actually signing people up for their credentialing process because they made it so many traps, right, for people, or so inaccessible for all the reasons we were talking about. Maybe you have a background check and you're a previously incarcerated person. That's perfect. That's somebody who needs to be in prisons and working with other previously incarcerated people. But then you put that restriction, so now they can't sign up. And now you're missing out on the people who actually are dying in birth or otherwise. So we're seeing stuff like that and just the setup being wrong for them. And sadly, Oregon, who does have a high reimbursement rate right now, they are a great example of folks that have been working for 11 years now on their policy because they have to keep going back and changing it every single time. They're just failing and changing it. At least they're trying to change it. But other states, it goes down. People have lost trust. There's so many pitfalls from discipline practices to what the competencies should be, whose culture those competencies come out of. We were really intentional in making an ancestral pathway for Washington State, meaning that if you come up through experience, birthing, or maybe you came up under an elder or something like that, you have a legacy pathway to get in. You don't have to go qualify yourself through a whole bunch of white trainings, DONA, international trainings, and all that. And Oregon had the same kind of situation, but they didn't even put any parameters to it. So now they have people applying and they're just failing, right? Like, are not even getting approved. So there's so many things that are happening in the implementation that's making it hard. But again, like we said, if you build a base that is actually clear about what they wanted and sustainable in the first place, not to say it's going to be so much easier, but it definitely is a guiding light, right? To like get to where you want it to be something that you know is going to work for you. So yeah, we're seeing that in all those states. It's like crazy to see. They're coming back to try to figure out what does community directed policy look like, right? You're going to see people do community. What do they say? There's so many words. The type thing where you listen to community and then you do what you want to. That's what Andi was talking about. Like, oh, I listened to you, and here's the plan, and then I'll stand here and punch this number and testify here. Like, there's that. And then there's what we're doing, where we actually are making decisions. And, sometimes it's painful. I don't know everything. I go into a room, and I'm like, if I absolutely know nothing, I should be able to come out of this room being able to understand what's happening, have an analysis on it with a racialized and gendered lens, and then collectively have a stance, like, afterwards. And if you can't come into every space like that, then you're not building something that's real, right? Because you're going to run into community folks all the time who ain't been here for 5 years, and they need to be able to, like, engage. And so if you have a setup like a lot of those other states, which is similar to what Andi was saying, it never works. At some point, they're going to burn out. They're not going to enroll. They're going to get toasted in the process, or they're going to get stuck up in the system. And so I'm not saying we're perfect, but we definitely are trying to do lessons learned from all that. Yeah, so there's a lot of good hope. There's a great network and a person who's using what we've learned and helping to spread it around, and hopefully they can build the same.
Absolutely. I think just one more add to that is like just shifting, and this is just more on what you're saying, just being able to let community know who has the power. Like when it comes to like policymakers, like I forget what the process is in terms of like them needing like your demographics. I would like information research, like
Action research?
Yeah, like policymakers are going to need like tangibles from your community, like always. Like that's how they move policy. And so the interaction is gonna always be there, but oftentimes, like and especially with these other states, I would say, where the power comes from the policymakers coming to communities, is oftentimes like with shiny things, resources, like the interaction is like interact with us here and we'll guide you, as opposed to again building the power, which does take like knowledge, time. Like, oh my gosh, I will be honest, I am still very much learning the process of like what it does to interact with like policymakers. That's over there for me sometimes. But like I am in it and I'm aware of it now, and I'm still going to be learning about it. And so it's about how we're getting our communities to be on that same process.
Oh, great. There we go. Okay, cool. Hi. So I had a question. I was really interested in, let's see if I get the right one, but you mentioned a lot about bodily autonomy being a part of your work. My personal experience, especially like with healthcare, I know other people, is one of violation. And I'm really interested in working in a space where you're trying to both preserve and build up autonomy, and potentially working with people and people's bodies that have experienced violation and kind of acting as, if not a protector, then at least someone to be there with them. What are some like trauma-informed ways for doulas to work with people who maybe they've experienced sexual abuse, maybe they've experienced medical abuse? What, in an ideal world maybe, like what kind of policies or what kind of practices do you want to see more in helping like protect people and helping make that less traumatic? And maybe what do you all do personally to help people who have already been, or I mean everyone has to some degree, but like have already been victimized by that?
That's a good question.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I love trauma stuff. Sorry, this is like a special interest of mine.
Yeah, as a doula, so one of the things I always like advocate for when I'm like working with clients is like bodily autonomy means like no one should when it comes to the hospital setting and working with pregnant folks, like no one should touch your body without asking. Like basic consent, we're teaching little children consent, like that doesn't stop at your medical provider. And that's one thing I've been like also trying to talk to like medical providers about is like, you need to, I always ask like, please narrate what you're going to do. So they can't see what you're doing. So we want to know what's happening. So I always ask for narration, or I train or support my clients to be like, can you narrate? Because sometimes they won't listen to me since I'm just supposed to be in the room. And asking for consent, because just because you're a medical provider doesn't mean you don't need to ask for consent at all. And one of the things I do when I'm doing like my client interviews, when it comes specifically to trauma, I always ask, like one question I always ask anyone is just like, what goes on in your body, or like, how do you react when you are angry or in pain or uncomfortable? Are you a person who lashes out? Are you a person who like shuts down? Are you a person who's just like, I need space, but like freezes and you can't? So I ask folks to like really think about those things so I know how best to support them, because when we've experienced trauma, I know there's like a lot of good books of like, the body keeps score. I heard that's not the, like, My Grandmother's Hands is the better one. But it's like true, our bodies do keep tension and trauma, and we don't really like realize it because we try so hard to like push it away. So asking for those like accessibility needs of narration, consent, and just reminding folks consent. I'll always just be like, please ask before you touch our client, like, please, just please. Like, it should just be common knowledge, but I think medical providers think because they have, in that power dynamic, when we're analyzing that power dynamic, they come into the room, I can empathize with them because in most medical settings, and one thing I do talk about, they can only bill for 15 minutes of their time. So they're trying to get in and get out as fast as they can. And like, that's also a systemic thing of like, we have these providers that are on the end of a systemic issue, and then we have not the people that are being affected overall. But in the room with the power dynamics, the medical providers have that power or foreseen power. So yeah, sorry, that was a long-winded answer, but.
That's a good question. And I would say like how we embody that in our organizing work is like one of the things that the doulas wanted to see was that in a meeting, like could we get, or an event or whatever, could people walk out with the experience of being doula, right? It's one thing to keep talking about this as if it's like something separate from our bodies or what we're going through, whether you're a birthing person or not. When you are meeting with a legislator or when you're having a community event, are people leaving with like some of the experience of having a doula. So you'll see people in there reciting history, doing ancestral practices. Maybe they're doing an herbalism class or they have an altar. We have meditation that we do before we enter into hostile, white supremacist spaces / politics. And we debrief a lot. We archive our learning so we can pass it on. And trying to be better about revolutionary rest and celebration. But without, not having the whole book on trauma-informed care, I would say that's just come up as we've been going, and folks have been like, oh my God, you know what I mean? Like, that was horrible, that meeting. Like, we have people say a lot of things in meetings. You imagine we met 150 lawmakers, and they're not all the same people. So what do you do when they're messing with your sense of power or your sense of identity, saying something racist or homophobic or transphobic, like in the space, and you're supposed to be like this? I can't even list off to y'all the things that have happened, but the fact is we could come back together, be like, oh, this is what that was, right? We can vent, we can put it in a category, understand what it's a manifestation of, and then we can figure out a strategy for the next time.
Absolutely. And I think a tool that we utilize when we're setting up, because I think we were talking about this earlier, when we think about systems change, like that kind of has a connotation to it, but in reality, if we're trying to not necessarily adjust systems, and not also just trying to tear the systems completely down. I mean, yes, semantics, but like when you are trying to like adjust systems and change them for the better of everybody, we go back to the principles, like the anti-racist principles that we are able to build our strategies from, and there's like nine, yes. And I'm not gonna read all of them off of you, but in my eyes, it's one of the it's a setup. Again, it's like a strategy. It's a setup to how we're going to be moving through work, moving through something as a unit. And so it's kind of, in my eyes, one of the better tools we have for like trauma-informed care, because we're putting like the issues, the history, the ways to heal, like all out up front. And it's not just like a end all be all. It can always be added to when like we encounter a new issue or a new way of thinking. But the fact of it is it's proactive, and it's agreed upon by like your group, which is like some of the most fundamental things when it comes to like building. Any other questions?
I know, I thought I was feeling energy from over here too. I don't know. I'm putting it on y'all. You're moving.
If there's no more questions, I think we're at time.
Yeah, we're definitely on time.
Okay.
Ask later.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. This was so
Thank
great.
y'all so much for having us.
Thank you very much.
It's so helpful.
I really hope they all have like a good like rest of your evening. We're gonna hang around maybe for like a couple minutes afterwards. Feel free to come up individually. Yeah, there's like refreshments there. We'll be entertained. They got your sodas.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And then also we do have a little resource table at the back. Feel free. We do have our zines, and those are community. They're like different than our little brochures, but our little pamphlets. Not pamphlets. They're like books that have. Can you start with zines better?
Yeah, no, it's good. It's just like an artistic way of expressing like a collective thought. But to the question about what is happening outside of birth work, like you can see what are the stories that are coming from our base, and that may or may not lead into a campaign or might lead into different ways of organizing. But I think they did a really good job at like illustrating it. So,
Community-based research and community-based art, all in one.
Thank you
Amazing.
so much.
Thank you so
having
much.
us.
This was really wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.